Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm Scott Hurst. We begin with the decision by the Bank of Canada to hold the line on interest rates. The central bank is saying that while some elements of U.S. trade policy have started to become more concrete, trade negotiations remain fluid and the threat of new sectoral tariffs continues. It goes on to say that the Canadian economy has slowed but is showing signs of resilience, and that while inflation is still close to the 2% target, underlying inflation has picked up. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem says, as it did in April, the bank decided not to present a conventional forecast for growth and inflation.
I want to underline that the lack of a conventional forecast does not impede our ability to take monetary policy decisions. But the unusual degree of uncertainty does mean we have to put more weight on the risks. We're looking at over a shorter horizon than usual, and we are ready to respond to new information.
In the meantime, Ontario Premier Doug Ford posting this to social media that he's shocked by the bank's decision, saying that rather than waiting for Trump's tariffs to do more damage to the Canadian economy, the Bank of Canada needs to cut interest rates now. For more on this, joining me live is David McDonald, senior economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. David, thanks so much for your time. The bank holding the line on interest rates at 2.75%. I just initially want to get your reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't unexpected. I wonder if at this point this becomes the new normal. We are likely to experience a pretty bad second quarter in terms of economic growth and big downward revisions in economic growth for this year, 2025, and next year, 2026. If this isn't going to cause some pretty, substantial change in the interest rate, I'm not really sure what will for the rest of this year, for sure.
Yeah, with the outlook, as you mentioned, for the second half of the year, talk to us about what factors ultimately might have been behind this decision to hold the key interest rate the same.
Well, there was certainly a lot of discussion in the updated forecast, the monetary policy report, about underlying inflation. Now, the headline inflation that you see from the Statistics Canada reports every month is about 2%. The bank expects it to be at 2% through 2027. So we're on target for what the bank should be targeting. That being said, there was extensive ink devoted in this latest monetary report to arguing that inflation is not 2%, it's 2.5% or 3%, depending on various versions of the measure. I think that potentially what this means is that given that the bank sees inflation at roughly 2%, the interest rate is at the exact midpoint of what they expect the neutral rate is. So that's to say the interest rate is no longer helping nor harming the economy, that this may be the new normal, that we are at around the high 2% range, barring some sort of substantial decline in economic growth, that this we won't see further interest rate cuts this year because there's been pretty substantial revisions to the economic growth forecast, but no particular interest at this point in terms of cutting those rates.
I want to expand on the comment where you said the new normal. Some analysts say that might be it for cuts. Others think there are a couple more this fall. Why so much uncertainty? And we also heard the comments from Ontario Premier Doug Ford.
So we're starting to see the full impact of the tariffs. At the last announcement, there was more speculation as to what their impact might be, particularly on economic growth and particularly in the short term. For sectors that are linked to American exports, they have seen substantial declines in employment, but those have been offset to some degree in some other areas of the economy. The first quarter of economic growth this year was pretty strong, in large part because companies are trying to get ahead of the tariffs. So they were exporting a lot, importing a lot, getting ahead of those tariffs before they hit. But once they hit, now the bank expects a pretty substantial negative second quarter. Now, the quarter's already ended, but we'll get some more data on it on Thursday, and some pretty big revisions, downward revisions for the rest of this year as well as next year. This seems to me something that the bank would act on, that we are seeing big negative revisions. I suppose maybe one of the things that we're not seeing is negative growth over 2 quarters, which would signal a recession. That's the technical definition. They do expect growth to pick back up in the third quarter, the quarter we're in right now. And so no actual recession. But I mean, these are pretty negative numbers and pretty big change in the forecast. But despite that, we're not seeing a change. And so I think that this is it for rate changes for the rest of this year.
All right, David McDonald is the senior economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. David, always appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.